On this episode of China Uncensored, Australia bans Huawei and ZTE from building 5G networks. Want to strike a deal with China? Don't be stupid. And finally, U.S.-Taiwan relations are over the moon. This is China Uncensored. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. On Thursday, the Australian government put a ban on foreign companies building the next generation of wireless networks, 5G. Why the ban? Because companies likely to be subject to extrajudicial directions from a foreign government that conflict with Australian law shouldn't have control over Australians' wireless networks. Now, in that announcement, Australia didn't mention which foreign government they were concerned about. I guess that's a mystery. Incidentally, though, the ban will stop two giant Chinese companies, Huawei and ZTE, that had expressed interest in installing Australia's 5G network. This is a huge blow to Huawei, especially since they had made a huge push in Australia after getting shut out of the U.S. Speaking of mysteries, we just found out that my friend Megha Rajagopalan, who I was on a panel with at the Oslo Freedom Forum a couple of months ago, has been denied a renewal of her journalism visa. That effectively means she's been kicked out of China. But Chinese authorities didn't tell her why. Another mystery. This is going to be a tough case to crack. She had been a journalist in Beijing for 6 years, and she was good too. I can't figure out what changed. Why, earlier this year, she even won an award for this piece she wrote on the Communist Party's crackdown on minorities in Xinjiang. Well, I don't know why they kicked her out. If any of you can figure it out, please let me know. And if you think Chinese authorities are getting good at fooling anyone, well, they're also trying their hand at sarcasm. State-run China Global Television Network created a hilarious video called, "Thanks, Mr. Trump, you are great." But get this. They're not actually saying he's great. They mean that sarcastically. I would know. I'm an expert at sarcasm. Their video is about how Trump's trade war has actually helped China, which they're not being sarcastic about.
Thank you for reinstilling in the Chinese a sense of humility. How can there be enough gratitude for highlighting the foibles of overconfidence and self-congratulation? Never a virtue, except in your case.
You see, by taking that swipe at Trump, they'll distract viewers from remembering how Chinese authorities violated WTO rules and stole trillions of dollars worth of U.S. intellectual property. And then there's this hilarious quip.
And on behalf of doctors, thank you for pointing out the need to wean off American goods like bourbon and bacon.
Because the danger to Chinese people's health is not China's rampant pollution or constant food scandals or bad vaccines. No, it's bacon and alcohol from America that are the danger. The South China Morning Post describes CGTN as part of a growing arm of state media designed to tell China stories as it makes a global push to improve its soft power. In other words, it's part of China's information or propaganda warfare against the West. They're banking on some Americans disliking Trump so much that they'll actually side with the Chinese Communist Party. But CGTN's attempt at sarcasm is pretty hard to watch. Seriously, guys, leave sarcasm to the professionals. Strangely, CGTN pulled this video from YouTube only a day after they put it up. Maybe the fact that they released this video just as U.S. and Chinese officials are meeting about the trade war was seen as a little too politically insensitive. Whoops. Malaysia's Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad met with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang this week. It was Mahathir's first trip to China since taking office earlier this year, and there were a few pieces of Chinese etiquette that Mahathir clearly didn't know. For instance, when dealing with Chinese officials, typically, they consider it very impolite to repeatedly slam your predecessor for their stupidity in dealing with China. He was concerned about several major construction projects with Chinese companies, although he was super vague about whether they were canceled or just deferred. Mahathir is worried about these Chinese deals in Malaysia since the deals follow a pattern the Chinese regime has established with other countries. Get them deeply in debt and then squeeze. In other words, when his predecessor made those deals, well, he was being stupid. The Chinese Communist Party has been ramping up the pressure on Taiwan, and anyone who's ever been nice to Taiwan, or even acknowledged it exists. And now it seems yet another country has caved to the pressure, El Salvador. This is El Salvador, which of course is Spanish for the Salvador. It used to diplomatically recognize the Republic of China, aka the government of Taiwan, as the one true government of China. Not anymore. That means in the entire world there are only 17 countries left that recognize the sovereignty of the Republic of China. And some of them are barely even real countries, like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. What's that, Shelley? Okay, apparently it's really nice there, but most of the 17 countries that are still tight with Taiwan are small island nations that, let's be honest, don't have much power in the world. It's like in high school gym class when they're picking teams, only instead of you being the kid no one wants on their team, there are already 2 teams and everyone's leaving the small one that's nice for the big one that buys you fancy jerseys and infrastructure. Other Latin American countries have also left Taiwan for China. Panama broke ties with Taiwan in 2017. The Dominican Republic did it just this May. And in exchange for their new loyalties, the Chinese Communist Party will give these countries big gifts that come with horrible debt traps that future leaders will call stupid. Meanwhile, in China, some genius on social media asked what law exactly says Taiwan can't be called a country, to which the authorities said, obviously no law says that, we make up the laws as we go. Here, we'll demonstrate, by arresting you. Police said he had profaned the people's feelings. Hey, which law says you can't profane the people's feelings? Exactly. You know, it's a good thing China requires people to use their real names on social media. They say the real name law is to help stop terrorists, which I guess includes 18-year-old kids who ask too many questions. However, the Trump administration seemingly has taken on the mantle of using Taiwan to troll China. While the United States does recognize mainland China as the one true China, the Trump administration has also been friendly to Taiwan, like by giving the president of Taiwan a special tour of NASA. This was a first for a president of Taiwan. Tsai Ing-wen was on her way back to Taiwan from a recent trip she made to Paraguay and Belize. She apparently felt she needed to shore up ties with her allies in Latin America. Now, the Chinese Communist Party was not happy that Tsai even was making a stopover in the U.S., let alone getting a tour of NASA. The reason this was such a troll, though, is because the U.S. would never allow a scientist from mainland China to visit NASA. Seriously, in 2011, Congress banned NASA from working with China because of the risk of espionage. 2 years later, a group of Chinese scientists was excluded from attending a conference on NASA's Kepler Space Telescope program. Let's just say when Xi Jinping sees this footage, he won't exactly be over the moon. And before you go, did you know that China Uncensored is funded almost entirely by viewers like you? That's why every episode I say thank you to what I call the China Uncensored 50-cent army, the folks who contribute to the show on the crowdfunding website Patreon by answering their questions. Let's see. Bob Buffalo asks, is there a possibility for Hong Kong to get its independence like Singapore in a probable future? Well, that would basically only happen in one of those bizarre what-if comic book storylines. I mean, what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires? In 1965, the Parliament of Malaysia voted unanimously to expel Singapore. A few hours later, the Parliament of Singapore passed the Republic of Singapore Independence Act, and Singapore became an independent and sovereign republic. But there is no way ever that China's National People's Congress will ever say, Hong Kong, we don't want you. In fact, the Communist Party was ready to invade Hong Kong in 1960 if the British ever tried to implement democracy in Hong Kong. So no matter how much the people of Hong Kong want independence, or even just a tiny bit more democracy, they'll never get it from the Chinese Communist Party. Thanks for your question, Bob. And remember, you too can have your questions answered on the show. Head over to patreon.com/China Uncensored and become a member of our 50-cent army. You'll get some neat stuff, help out the show, and have your deepest, darkest questions answered. Well, maybe. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time. My beloved fans, did you know that Matt, Shelley, and I have a new podcast called China Unscripted? We go into way more detail about all the things you want to know about China that we can't fit into our usual episodes. So subscribe to China Unscripted on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify.